I really appreciated David's generosity and willingness to dive into this focus with me on patriarchal sex because it is obviously such a deep and complex topic that the guest speakers are not necessarily immersed in themselves in their own work. And so when they come on here to speak with me, they're unpacking their thoughts in real time. And that takes courage for such a huge topic. And everyone brings a few keys that are so important to this collective inquiry. And then we're all looking at the elephant in the room, describing how we see it and gradually unveiling the whole thing so it's no longer invisible. And some of the things that I found really helpful as contributions to this podcast was how David spoke to some hidden places in the male psyche around violence to men's sexuality, expectations of self that anyone, any gender can put upon themselves. And the overriding that a man is doing in his own body in having patriarchal sex, which is from both self-inflicted and socially imposed ideas of how to be a man that are creating disconnection from real emotions and real sensory feelings. And of course, there's very much a female version of that, which we attend to very deeply in the Tigress Path. And also with David, we were alluding to how part of being a good lover is taking the time to connect with oneself and to stay in connection with your own body and not just focus on techniques or trying to have an effect on someone else, which is also a really big part of the Tigress Path for women as well. And in terms of David's expertise, I want to say that for anyone feeling challenged, facing feelings of shame, see if you resonate with his approach and look him up because he teaches in such an authentic and really human way that contrasts so much of the typical, more clinical approach of psychologists. And David Bedrick is in the US. He founded the Santa Fe Institute for Shame-Based Studies to teach therapists, coaches, and healers how to liberate shame from the body and mind. And he's got 4 books now and does courses. So I hope you really enjoy his perspective in this episode with David Bedrick. Welcome to this provocative and heartfelt podcast, where patriarchy is defined as a paradigm that both men and women uphold in different ways. Here you get to listen in on genuine conversations between leaders from around the world to discover more mutual respect and less division, as well as more pleasure and love in your life. My name is Devashi Shakti, and you are warmly welcome to be part of these Beyond Patriarchal Sex conversations. So, so everyone, I'm happy to be here today with David Bedrick. And I didn't end up asking you exactly how to introduce you, but I see you placing yourself in the community as someone who is passionate about and experienced in helping people to unravel shame, which is
Hmm.
one of probably maybe the most difficult human emotion to
Yeah,
work through, actually.
yeah.
So, can you tell us a little bit about the specialization that you have?
Hmm. Well, I grew up in a house that was marked by violence. And for me, that meant that I have a father who used fists and belts and voice to express his rage. So that's a scary place to live. And then I had a mother who was relatively disempowered. That wouldn't be unusual. I'm just about 70 and for my parents' age, some today also. And disempowered means something very specific with regard to shame. That meant that she couldn't deal with that violence. She couldn't say to my father, stop, or that's not okay, or David, are you okay? Or she couldn't do anything other than deny as best she could that that was happening. I'm not blaming her or excusing her. I'm just saying that's the condition. So then that violence has two effects. One is a violence that hurts me, scares me, and then lives inside, right? Like violence that you internalize. I internalize. I have a father that then lives in me after that, that's rough with me inside, right? And then some people would say feel that outside from me too. That father that lives in me also could hurt another person. Does that make sense? Because it lives in me. I have to figure out what to do with that.
Mm, mm,
But then there's a second aspect of the violence. Then I have something inside that operates like my mother. It wouldn't have to be a mother, by the way. So careful with making mothers the blame of psychology. But in my case, it was a mother. And the way that lives in me is, am I right? Is that really happening? This doesn't really hurt. Maybe this is good for me. I'm not sure. I'm not sure of what's really happening. If you say something really nasty to me, no, maybe that's just me. Can you follow the way the denial system also goes inside? What's true? Maybe I'm just a screwed up person. Maybe I'm angry for no reason. I don't. And that mentality, what's wrong with me? Why is this screwed up? I can't trust myself. That lands inside. And that I call shame, an
mm.
internalized perspective on oneself. So that if something happens to you, you don't think, oh, that was a story. That's what happened to me. Of course, I feel these ways. Instead of thinking that, you think, why am I feeling like this? I should make this go away. I'm so screwed up. Why am I angry? Why am I depressed? Why am I using substances? What's wrong with me? And if shame enters, that's how you address your healing. Let me fix what's wrong with me. And if shame's not operating, you think what's happening for you belongs to a story. It has intelligence and messages in it, and you can integrate that, and it makes sense that you would have those experiences.
Yeah. And let me fix what's wrong with me comes after the belief that there must be something wrong with me for
Yeah.
having been in that environment, right?
Yeah. It doesn't, that belief, something's wrong with me for being there, right? That doesn't enter unless there is a person or an environment or a culture that witnesses your violence that way. I'm saying witnesses meaning like my mother is, I'm calling her a witness, right? Even if I tell you now, let me tell you what my father did. You're momentarily a witness, a person who's going to be on the
Yeah.
receiving end of my story. And if I had never talked to anybody about it, it would be very significant how you respond. So people don't come up with the sense of something's wrong with me unless that relationship exists. Now, it might not be a person because the whole culture could be sexual abuse denying, right? That doesn't really happen. We know more than 80% of women say, I've been sexually violated in my life. 30 to 70%, depending on the study, say, I never told a single person.
Mm.
Why? Well, why wouldn't they tell? That's the right question. Because if you were in an environment that you felt safe, loved, you would want to tell, right? You don't say,
Yes.
let me tell you what happened to me, or to your mother, to your father, or to his friends, or to a teacher, or to whoever, somebody, or an elder, you would naturally want to tell. So that sense of something wrong with me only happens because there's an individual or a culture that lives inside already that says, marginalize your experience. What's happening for you is not because of a story and it's not smart, it's bad. You got to get rid of that so that you can be more debauché.
Yes, yes. And I guess, David, also if there is an impression from the outside in that scenario where um it's it's just witnessed in the sense that there's a normalizing of it, that there's no support for it. So it's so then invisible as complex trauma, and that can be really difficult too. And that's the experience of, patriarchal violence and control, and how that exists in the culture, which is going to be part of our exploration today.
Yeah,
But I thank you for bravely sharing some of your story,
yeah,
and I personally really can relate quite a lot
yeah,
to what you've
yeah.
shared. And it's actually a big part of my um, specialization in working with women,
Hmm.
because there is such a huge scope of responsibility on the feminine side to not birth this trauma imprint over and over again. And it's so
Yeah.
difficult not to as well, because when a woman has just seen that over and over in her lineage, she's just playing out what she knows and she's stuck in her own trauma. But
Yes.
when that can be released, it's
Hmm.
incredible
Yeah.
how much of power a woman realizes that she actually has.
Right. She needs a witness somewhere, a friend, a book, a story that somebody else tells, a community, a therapist, a friend, or a mother, or a father, somebody who gets it. And then very different things happen. Somebody who gets it. Oh, what you're talking about is this. Of course, you're feeling that. Somebody who has that and then shows this matters to me. You matter that that's happening. Your life flow and what you deliver to the world and how you love and hate matters to me. When that enters, that shifts that sense of the trauma. Hmm.
Yeah. And I'm so appreciating right now your ease and ability, well, apparent ease in my perspective, an ability to be comfortable with the fucking mess of the
Yeah.
human experience, but with so much sensitivity and
Mhm.
compassion because of everything that you've been through. You
Yeah.
really come across that way, David.
Yeah. I worked with a woman the other day, and it was in a group because I'm not doing individual work in the last 5 years. So it was in a teaching, and we were working on trauma. And this woman said that she told about an experience that was very painful, and she said she felt a kind of dissociation and the kind of powerlessness. And I said, let's go into that feeling, whatever it is. I never say don't feel that or it's wrong. And then she was moving towards that powerlessness. I don't want to feel that. I want to feel strong. That's great. We want to help her feel strong and find power. And there's an experience of powerlessness that's still unseen. Doesn't mean we want her to feel powerless. I don't want her to feel powerless ever. But are we sometimes? Yes. Was she
Yeah,
powerless to do something about it? Yes. Does that live in her psyche, embody the sense of, I can't do something about this? Not that we want her to walk around feeling that way, but we don't want to walk around thinking, I have to push that feeling that I had inside away. Maybe it's reasonable. And actually, it was because when we got close to the powerlessness, she felt, oh, I couldn't do anything about it. So we want her to have her power, but we didn't want her to have a power thinking, if I was powerful, this wouldn't happen. Right? Can you follow? That's a very big difference. Anyway, but you made me think of that because of my own experience, because I grew up in experiences where I was overpowered and I couldn't get out.
yes.
Hurt, I was pinned down many times and I didn't have the strength. I'd like to have it now. I don't think that I should stay pinned down,
Mm.
but my understanding of what it's like to not be able to fight back sufficiently has
Yes,
helped a lot. I'm not thinking it's good that I had that. I didn't need that lesson, but I got it anyway.
yes,
And now when someone says, I didn't feel powerful, it's okay with me to understand that because I know inside that's a profound experience to be
yes,
powerless. I don't have to make it go away. Does that make sense? Yeah.
yes. And I can relate to that also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I read your background isn't all in therapy, is it? So, what are your areas of study and focus that you've had until now?
Yeah. I mean, psychology and therapy is my long standing. I've written, well, my fifth
Okay,
book will come out in February. Um, My last book is called The Unshaming Way. Gabor Mate just endorsed that really beautifully. I was proud of that.
great.
Um, I spent 8 years practicing law. So I
Mhm.
did family law and worked with very dicey custody situations for children when the
Mm,
parents were hated each other enough not to care what happened to the child, you know. It's okay
wow.
if people hate each other a little bit, but if somebody else has to pay and you can't notice that. I want to hurt you so bad I can't notice who else is in the field.
Yes,
Then I would get those cases, and that led me to be very interested in those problems, and it led me to feel like this is now too much for me. I can't stand it anymore. I gotta leave the territory. So
yeah, I can
yeah,
see how that would give you a lot of incentive to hone in on therapeutic services instead, for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so, David, I've invited you to uh,
Mm.
be the expert on unraveling from shame and unshaming, as you say, in this conversation of going beyond patriarchal sex, which
Yeah,
includes acknowledging that it exists.
yeah,
And I shared with you on the email exchange that even the really beautiful, conscious men that I know, some of them, are really challenged in this particular conversation that I'm bringing forward
yeah,
because even though it's very openly framed as, of course, this is a co-creation, women have their role in upholding this too, and we unpack all of that as well. There's still this place in a man that can come up of, well, I'm being blamed. And now I feel ashamed, and now I can't engage. I can't even approach the conversation at all.
huge, huge. It's a deep, it's a deep thing and a difficult problem to move. Because if you're saying patriarchy has injured women, and I am not, I don't want to say certain words, I am not elder enough. I'm going to tell you what I mean by elder. That it could be a 6-year-old who's an elder. So it's not just age, but aging can sometimes mature people, sometimes not. If I'm not elder enough, then I can't bear witness to your experience. Remember my mother's story, that I can't be, and why not? Because I am under so much attack that I haven't addressed that anytime you poke, it raises up in me the violence that I experience. So my first impulse then is I'm going to defend myself, right?
Yes.
That doesn't belong to you necessarily, depending on how you are. Let's say you're just bringing this forward. That doesn't belong to you, but it belongs to my story before you get here. So that means I don't know much about the violence I've experienced or haven't processed it enough so that I'm relatively safe in my own skin. Not 100%. I don't know who is 100% safe. Maybe some people are. I'm not like that. But I'm relatively meaning, and then I can kind of go, that brings up stuff for me, or I know these things, but, and I can listen to you and hear what you're saying as a witness to your experience. And that means I have to separate myself from the word patriarchy if possible. If I can't, then that person's not going to be able to do that for a while. And then I would say to them, go off and work on that. What does it look like? Then I would say to that, if that person say, I can't do this without getting upset, or I just want to fight back, then I would say, I'm going to take you away from Devashi's presence in the moment. And I'm going to ask you what the criticisms that go on inside of you. You're bad, you're terrible, you're disgusting, you're da, 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 you're an abuser. And I'm going to say those things to you, and I want you to fight back as hard as you can to me against the criticisms that I'm going to lay on you. Does that make sense? Because that needs to be processed a little bit. That won't,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? So that person has to be able to, okay, fight back. It lives in you. Let's find out where it belongs. And until the person makes some space for that, it's going to be hard to actually listen to another person. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yes.
my thought. What are your thoughts about? That's how I would approach that situation.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I think it's really important for everyone to feel like there's space to actually unpack what is it bringing up for them.
Yeah,
And the way it's presented, it is that actually. And yet even so, that response can still come up. And that just shows how deep that pain, unprocessed pain inside actually is.
yeah, exactly. And then hopefully there are some people, and if the need is for some men to do that, because some women should do that and can do that, but some men can and ought to do that as well, then you need to have some men who have some level, I call it eldership, meaning I know enough about the violence, I know enough about my need to defend myself in places, I know how to care for that and hold that, and I can also hear something about what you're saying that's not only taken personally, but you're saying something patriarch that's a systemic, that's not David. He carries some of that for sure. I grew up as a male. It's impossible for that not to be in my blood. So, but I also recognize you're talking about a systemic
Yes.
experience. And then hopefully then I can bear witness to that. take responsibility. I don't know. It's a different kind of word. It wouldn't be hard for me, but not in the sense of I'm responsible. I'm a bad person. If I think I'm responsible, I should beat myself up. It's not going to work. Responsible could be to hear you. That's a response, right? To see
Yeah.
it, or maybe even to see how it's happening in the moment, or to learn, I think I may have some of that in me. If I validated it that way, it would be very healing for the other side. If I told the
Yeah.
story of how I've perpetrated some of that, at least a little bit at times, then some women would experience that as healing, that somebody went, oh my gosh. Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't see much value in a man trying to personalize a systemic issue to the degree that he would have to take responsibility for patriarchy itself.
Yeah.
That's too much. That's not necessary, right? But in the conversation around naming patriarchal sex, then it could be useful to reflect and say, well, actually, yeah, I have
Yeah.
displayed some of these behaviors. I have done some of this. And the men that have already met that and they've deconstructed that somewhat inside of themselves, I feel the voices and the experience and eldership, as you say, of these men is so important for other men to be able to hear that and witness that and maybe relate to that. And I can say from a female perspective as well that any man who's willing to look into it is far more trustworthy, including a man who says, yes, I have fully done those behaviors and now I know otherwise. That kind of man is more trustworthy to me and many other women than the man
Yeah.
who says, oh no, I don't do that. I've never done that. That doesn't exist in my reality.
Right. It's such a deep thing you're bringing up, and the scope and the time frame for changes like this. I'm making a waving motion because it's like an overtime thing. Because what happened in the 60s and 70s, some men, and today still, experience their need to be open and caring as a tearing down of their strengths and capacities. I have to be really open. I'm
Yeah.
exaggerating. I have to be open and feeling, etc. And some men did that. I don't want to be like my father. I don't. I don't want to treat children or my wife the ways my father treated me or or his wife. So that's a good thing. I don't want to do that. But then some men experienced, okay, I won't be that way. And then they got more tender. I think that's really good. More feeling. I think that's really good. But took away from themselves the power that lives in them that they didn't know what to do with. Because if I don't use my power in the way I learned from my father, let's say, I still have to learn what to do with the power. I can't just kind of go, I won't be that way. I'm a nice person. That's not going to be sufficient. And then there's a backlash. If there's a men's world or something, there's a backlash. And many men say, "Ooh, I'm a man. I don't want to be that mushy, new age, mushy, da 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 da." And they have a point also, meaning I was stripped of some of the powers. And then the question is, what do I do with the power that handed off to me in a violent way? And I don't want to live it in a violent way, an abusive way, but I need contact with my father's fists and belts in order to say no to somebody, or this is what I need, or to finish a book. So, you know what I'm saying? So or to stand up and listen to you, because if I don't feel powerful at all, I'm just going to be wiped out by you. So that's not going to be so good. So in the men's world, that's a complicated movement around claiming the power and figuring out what to do with it. And what do I do with power that I learned in a violent way? Hmm. Other
I'm
than say
so
no to it.
so
Yeah.
happy you voiced that. This is really, really important.
Hmm.
And if men are also hearing on this platform with this project, David, that it's not like women or I am saying to leave their masculinity at the door.
Yeah.
It's like the strength of true masculinity is welcome, is desired, and then when men hear that on top of everything else that they've already started processing, I wonder if they think, well, this is just all too hard. I don't understand.
Yeah. That would be a good if somebody genuinely said that to me. This is really too hard. I don't understand. I would think that person needs to learn. If that was right, if that was a genuine humility, this is really hard. I don't know how to do this. And I say, then I should learn how to teach better to that particular person. If it's like this is too hard, I don't want to deal with it. That's a different attitude. That's a
That's
passive
more,
aggressive. That's a
yeah,
passive aggressive attitude. Then that's a conflict. Yeah, go ahead. You're going to say something.
yeah, the latter one is the more common reaction, I
Yeah.
imagine, in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. Yeah.
Yeah. Then men need to hang out with other men and learn from other men, etc. Some of that, not only, right? We should separate, and women should develop solidarity, and men should develop some solidarity and help each other and stuff. But learning together, it's all of it. I don't, there's not one way to go. Um,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
patriarchy. When I think of the word patriarchy, I think of a social and systemic inequality of power
Mm.
that is given regardless of person, just because of genitalia, let's say. So that's not okay for some people either. So, but
Yes.
given to this thing called masculine, that's an unequal amount of social power. Personally, you may be much more powerful than me, but there's given a difference in social power, and that leads to differences in income, your body getting hurt and not cared about as much, different differences in medical systems, educational systems, not thinking be a doctor, you should be a nurse. So it's educational systems, it's economic systems, it's medical systems, it's social systems that value you, that lift your voice up to be heard, so that people listen to me quicker than they'll listen to you, as a woman to man to woman, not me to you, not necessarily, but
Yeah.
so we're talking about a system of power differences. I'm not talking about men and women. I'm talking about power. Now, people say don't use patriarchy for that. Okay, well, you give me your word. But 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 the issue is there's a power difference. And when power differences are around, abuses will happen. And if power differences are not seen, then it's more likely they'll be abused. Because if I don't think I don't have more power than you as a man, as a woman, then I'm blind to a social dynamic. And that means the injury could happen, and then I won't witness it. I'll say, what do you mean? It's just me, David, and Devashay. It's not a man and a woman. Does this make sense? I'm just
Yeah.
David. What do you mean? Mhm. Yeah,
Yes. If the power differences are not seen, they'll be abused, is basically what you've said here. And so then how would you describe what patriarchal sex is in your words, your impression of what that would be?
sex meaning the actual touching and orgasm, and I mean, I never thought about that term before, so I'm learning and thinking with you. So I have to
Yeah.
think of my own personal experience. Mhm. What would I think of as patriarchal sex? For me as a man, one thing it means is that in terms of shame, that means I should be ready and hard and able to do it, independent of other experiences that I have. That's one part of it. So then I can feel good about myself, proud about myself as a man person, if I'm hard and ready and functioning in that way. But if I'm not, then I should think of that as a pathology, something wrong with me or an inadequacy in me that I should get over, as opposed to, I don't know, I'm not really there. What's going on? I'm feeling a little tender, whatever, as opposed to those experiences, my less hard and ready experiences, being important ones. I would think it not. There was a while, by the way, I'm not sure when I did this research, but it could have been more than 20 years ago, when the drug Viagra, which is I will get your penis hard for a certain amount for a length of time. That was what that drug was. Some people know that it was called for erectile dysfunction. I'm saying it, I'm emphasizing that because how many men actually had a dysfunction or just didn't get hard, weren't turned on or whatever the reason is. So there was a point when that was the largest selling drug on the planet.
Mm.
On the planet. In the UK, they had to take Viagra off of the healthcare system because they had a national healthcare system, or it would bust the bank.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Radical. So that says that men are, if they're soft, then I have something wrong with me, and I should get
Mm.
treated, and should get fixed. And it has nothing to do with my intimacy or my feeling or my attraction or where I am or whether I'm exhausted that day or whether I need tenderness and not hardness. It has nothing to do with that. It only has to do with my lack of functioning. And if you sell that to men, they'll buy it. And then the medical system will be happy to do that. And then if I go to a doctor, I'm not getting hard enough, that they won't say, "What's your relationship like?" Right? They'll say, "Oh, here's the drug." So
Yeah.
what happens to my sense of inadequacy or my need for softness or tenderness or I need something from you or so think about that kind of violence to men's sexuality under that situation because if you told a woman, makes me want to weep actually, 'cause it's really painful. If you told about the men's experience, because it's unconscious, most men aren't thinking that's a violent thing that I'm doing to myself that I've been taught. If you told a woman, if you're not wet and ready and juicy, something's wrong with you, take a drug. Then we would say that's like rape cultures.
Yeah.
Don't you think? You shouldn't have to like, I mean, maybe that you want that and that's fine and you could lubricate and stuff, but it's not, what I mean? That's because you want to, right? If you just think I should be there and I'm not there and I have to make myself there, independent of how you feel and that means the body is not consenting, right?
Yes.
And
And
then
David, that is the female experience of patriarchal sex for a lot of women. That actually is happening over and over and over again. And a lot of women have never experienced sex outside of that.
isn't that incredible? My consent is not even not asked for. It's not even an idea in my world. And for men, it's not even an idea in my world. Do I consent? Of course I consent because I thought that's what men don't even think, right? I should do it. If I get a chance, I should do it, right? That's the idea. Otherwise, I'm not a man. So
Yeah.
the consent, that means it's a violent, that means it's an abuse, it's a rape of the male. I mean, that's strong, but that's really what it is. It says your consent about your sexuality is irrelevant.
Mm.
Whoa, that's it. And then go back to the witness. It's not witnessed. It's witnessed as, oh, here's the drug. It's not witnessed as, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Maybe you got injured in the war and is really in a dysfunction, but maybe you're just don't have a yes sometimes.
Yes, yes. And
Whoa. You go ahead.
right, right. And perhaps the definition of sex being just about penetration that you have to be hard for all the time is really limiting, really, really limiting. And actually, in your language here, abusive in the definition of what people think it is and should be and what they expect of themselves.
Yeah,
Because
it's
there's no
really,
real intimacy in it if that's all it is.
yeah, it's a deep, deep wound in the male psyche.
Yeah.
And then who teaches? When I was, uh, when I had my first intercourse experience, I, going back, I was very young. I think I was like 13. I was so over my head. I had no idea what was going on. Is all I thought is, I better do this. I got to do this. I got to do this, right? And inside, I was like, I am terrified, not excited, terrified. I don't remember anything about that experience other than how overwhelming it was. I don't remember pleasure. I don't remember pain. I don't remember shit. I remember where we were. It's all I remembered is how do I get this and how do I get out of here? And I didn't have the voice to say, I got to get out of here, right?
Yes.
And then who did I tell? Not a soul. Why?
This message is for the ladies. If you want to fully get in touch with yourself and your body, enter the Tigress Path. Here you become an initiated woman living way beyond patriarchal sex, and also become a safe space for men to learn about patriarchy without the blame. Inside the Tigress Path, we have personal transformation and also professional accredited training options. The links to connect are below with this episode.
Because I would have gotten a reaction that would have made me feel shitty. Nobody would have said, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" No, yeah, it's okay. You don't have to be ready for that. Tell me about it. Oh my gosh, how painful. Nobody would have said, "I want to witness your experience."
Mm.
Yeah, that was really very impactful, affected my sexual life throughout my life. That experience of I have to be ready, and if I can't, I'm not this, and I should get over that, and I should learn things in order to be a good lover, not because I wanted to be, or wanted to care about somebody, or that it was
Yeah.
cool to be a good lover. It was because I, otherwise, not a good person, or not an adequate male. That's a different motivation, you know.
So all
Yeah,
the impressions that you and a boy is taking in is around how he needs to be performing, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
And I love how you're breaking this down, David, to such a interior part of the male psyche in this, where it's like, well, men are overriding their own experience unconsciously so much that before it even gets to the interaction with the partner or the woman, it's his disconnection from himself.
yeah, absolutely. And then we have mothers and fathers that are in a culture that's not saying, let's talk about these things from an intimate point of view. And if my father doesn't know anything about that, then he can't teach me. Not just teach me, like give me words, because the teaching has to be a body visceral. There has to be somebody right next to the younger male. It can't just be, let me explain things to you. It has to be someone who touches you, literally, has to
Mm.
have a body to it and feeling to it and maybe humbling stories to it. It has to have something where I'm viscerally, somatically moved. Otherwise, information won't do that. It has to be intimate, right? I have to have somebody put their hands on me and say, let me tell you something. So that I'm kind of like, oh, right, there's a person who's asking me to be here. Does that make sense? Otherwise, and women too, with their mothers and with their fathers, right? Both need that, the male and the female, and that I would say for many women, some women don't have that or it's not, but they need something like that. A man who is, when they're younger, who gets it, who knows you're also a sexual being, who's not acting sexually with you, who's, you know what I mean? Who's like, oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so incredibly beautiful the way that you describe that. So, and what I get from that is the imprint that seeing the demonstration as a boy that vulnerability and masculinity can coexist, you
yeah,
know, and that needing to come from an elder somehow.
yeah. We need elders on men and women. We need elders. And again, by elders, I mean somebody who's worked on themselves enough to say, I'm more or less here. I can witness to another person who's not me and not project my own experience onto them, whether that's another culture or another world or a person of a different color or a different nation or a different gender. And say, I don't know your kind of person. I'm willing to get to know that. Um, but some people can do that very, very young for some reason. And some
Mm.
people can never do that. So it's not aging can develop that, but it's not only aging.
Yeah,
Some
for
children
sure.
just get that right away for some reason, and it comes intact. So
Yes, yes, yes.
mhm.
And the amount of sensitivity and inner attunement and inner journeying that it takes for someone to offer that deep listening that you're talking about, it takes a lot to oftentimes to become that capable.
Yeah,
Um, it seems like there is very little context for the value of that in the culture. You know, it's
yeah,
coming from the therapeutic model, even exactly like maybe in places like people like yourself, but on a whole, that's not the message that I believe men are being given, that boys are being set up with on a psychological health level. Like, you know, if I tell you, one of the women in Australia in my community, she sent me a pamphlet, a government-funded pamphlet, and it was instructions on how to strangle safely because it's
Wow.
such an epidemic that boys from, you know, seeing porn as sex education are trying to replicate that, and it's happening in such high numbers that the government felt that they needed to step in, and that was the best that they could do, which is incredible,
That's
right?
radical. That's radical. That's a piece of data. It's a piece of data of like, wow, that brings it, makes it very real.
Yeah.
Phew. Hmm. I'm a very big James Baldwin fan. I don't know if you're familiar with James Baldwin. I got a picture of him on my desk for the last 30 years. That's James Baldwin, is an African American, um, and died in 60s, 1960s. And thinking about him at the moment because his lovers were men.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying it that way. I'm not saying gay because he had reasons that he didn't like that terminology, but that's another story. But he wrote about his lover men. He was very out. He wasn't closeted about being black and men being his lovers. Not sometimes that was who he was. That was who he loved and had sex with.
Yeah.
And but people from various communities would say, "Speak up for us, speak up for us." Speak up for the that bump point was homosexual, where gay wasn't really used so commonly. Speak up for our community. And he said, speak up for the gay community. And he said, well, I don't really see myself that way. And they said, well, but you wrote a whole book. He wrote a book called Giovanni's Room about two male lovers. You wrote a whole book about two male lovers. And he said, the reason why I did that was because I was trying to think people are really frightened and terrified of actual love, he said. They're terrified. And I thought, what can I do to help people connect with how scared they really are? And I'm going to show them a black man and a white man having sex together. And he says, it wasn't a gay novel, quote unquote. Isn't that amazing? Like, and he was very supportive. So he wasn't like anti-gay. He said that this was a book about love and people frightened. And I thought, this will frighten people. Isn't that amazing? Speaking
Yes.
of in those kind of things, he was like, this will show people that are frightened. And his thing about being gay, when people asked him about that, he said, why you don't like that term gay and homosexual? He said, if people weren't afraid of love, they would never have given me a label. They wouldn't have to have homosexual, gay. He said, so he said, if the people who give me that label, it's their problem. I don't have
Yes.
a problem. Anyway, that's his spiritual intelligence, you could say. Um,
Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And it's not the same, but I actually don't love the label feminist. And
mhm.
someone could clearly say that I am. I kind of wish there was no need for it, to be honest,
Mm.
right?
So what do you do then with your activist aspect that wants to out dynamics that injure women? How do you hold that then? How do you describe that?
Well, I'm not only interested in what injures women, uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, but there is that too.
Yeah.
And I guess this project is a expression of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my where I'm most moved from to come forward with this is actually the children and
Mm.
what's happening. And then, of course, the women and the vulnerability and the feminine in everyone.
Yeah. The feminine in everyone. I know many
Mm.
men would say the feminine and the masculine. I would say yes. And the reason why I would emphasize the feminine a little bit more, I don't know how much more, some more, is because the power differences in the culture. It's not because feminine is more important than masculine or masculine. I don't know. People can talk about that. I don't have those sense. But if one is disempowered, if that one voice is lessened, then my thought is then it needs to be lifted first. If I was in a fist fight with a 10-year-old, And somebody wanted to help, I say, first you better help that 10-year-old because I can probably overpower them. Not because I'm better or they're worse, but because it's not a fair fight. So
Yes.
lift them up a little bit, and then maybe we can then be equal. So to me, it's not that the feminine is more important. It's that the erasing of that aspect, the dissing and dismissing and denying of that power, including what happens to the earth, is really,
Yeah.
really important. And then there's a lot of pain happening. So I don't think we need women leaders, but I think we need more women leaders now because what do you do? Can the man have the feminine do that? Yes. I say yes, but but a lot of girls, it would be good to see women leaders in their eyes to have that image because it's part of the correction. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Very,
Um,
very true.
Amazing that you're taking on this focus and doing this work and focusing on sex and sexuality. It's so much shame around that, which to me means violence that hasn't been witnessed. It's not just I'm ashamed of sexuality. That means people have been violated and nobody has noticed. And violation happens not just in the most obvious thing, somebody grabs another person and physically assaults them, sexual assaults them, but the discussion, the religious institutions and the way it treats people injures them and then they don't notice. Like you said, it's normalized. So, and
Yes.
so
How
that,
invisible patriarchal sex has been is concerning, and so that's why bringing the term forward again in the culture, because I believe it's been used in the past, but people don't remember that now. And just naming it alone is a lot, let alone learning how to live beyond it, which is also part of this. But
yeah,
just to name it, David, because what people perceive as sex is a lot of the time quite violent. And I'm grateful that you brought forward that it's, like the reenactment of pornography and the standard pornography is actually openly degrading and actually violent towards women and women's bodies. But I love how you brought forward that there's a level of violence inside of a man towards himself in the first place in order to do that. And
yeah,
so this normalization that has made it invisible, that what is being accepted as the norm is violence is really concerning, and
yeah,
my background is actually somatic psychotherapy, tantric sexuality. And so rather than just staying in that zone of inviting people towards an evolution of their expression, which is still the work that I actually do with people, but I wanted to present it in a different way because oftentimes people are seeing um, conscious intimacy, tantra, as this far away thing that maybe they'll get to one day, or that it's this luxury that, don't most people don't get to live. And it's like, actually, it's just presence. It's real
mm,
love in the body. It's
mm,
something that's accessible and available to everyone when
yeah,
they're willing to look into how what they're already doing is a programmed
mm,
way of being that's not in your favor, like it's not in alignment with well-being.
yeah. And then what do you do with if you say, I won't just be present, and if I said being present means being in such a excruciating sense of inadequacy first, right? That's where I go first, that I can't bear it. What would you say to me then? I'm not saying that's my whole story, but we're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
I'm thinking with you because we're hanging out. Then what do you do? I say presence. If I were real, if a presence sounds good. If I say presence, me to be present in this person's experience, that means there's a lot of nightmares that
Mm,
for me to be present in this body to some extent, it's not the whole story, and I've worked on things, but nonetheless, being present in this body, if my own therapeutic experience with myself and others means, oh shit, some things might come up that are like, oh, I'll tell you what lives in my body. Ah, get me the freak out of here is what gets me. I just told you that story when I was 13, Get me out of here is what's in my body.
yes, yes.
Then what?
Well, I mean, it's not easy, so
Yeah,
acknowledging that it's not without its challenge to be able to look at this. But
yeah,
the consequence, the predictable outcome of not being willing to look at this has created so
yeah,
much distortion, so much breakdown of relationship and of family, and
yeah,
so many people not even wanting to be in relationship with each other at this point, and
yeah,
male suicide, so many financial issues. There is just so much fallout from not being willing to look, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's needed. And then I go back to that voice that you were saying at one point. I don't know how to do that, or and if I were genuine, right? If as opposed to I don't know how to do that, screw that, That's like I have no idea. You're in territory. I am so out of my depth. If I was 13, I'd be saying the same thing, right? If I could have had words, I wouldn't have these words, right? These are more an older man's words. But it's like I'm so far out of my depth. I have no idea. I've only been conditioned in this world,
Yes,
right? I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how to feel. I don't know who I am, quote unquote, outside of those structures. Mhm.
yes.
It's a fascinating. It makes me think Devashay. Is that how I say it?
Da-
Devashay?
Devashi, Devashi.
Devashi. Thank you. Sorry. Devashi. It makes me think about fundamentalisms. hmm Because if you work with somebody who is growing up in a fundamentalist world, that usually we think of that as a religious world, right?
Mm,
This is the truth, this is God, this is Jesus, this is what's good, this is what's bad, etc. Then it's not so easy to change out of that because if that holds you, even if it holds you in a way that's quite violating, but it does hold you. And you know what's right and wrong, and you know whether you can feel good about yourself or not, and you know what you can do to feel better, et cetera, et cetera. But then if you'd say, let go of that, whoa, but that's taking care of something, right? That's holding me up. And if I let go of that, whoo, glub, 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 I'm going to drown. But it makes me think, I hadn't thought about this way before, but when you're talking about what I'm understanding about your understanding of patriarchal sex, makes me think it's like a fundamentalism. It's like this is the truth, this is the God, truth, and the way, or whatever they call that, right? In the light, this is the way. You want to take that away from me? Uh-oh, I'm I'm sinking, right? I'm gonna drown.
yes.
Anyway, I've never thought about it that quite way, but I think that's an experience.
Well, yeah, that can be the conception of it, but in reality, it isn't exactly like that, is it? It's a, step by step unfolding of unraveling from it,
Right.
and the vulnerability that it takes to communicate your real inner experience with each other, for example.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. The vulnerability. Yeah, yeah, you're what made you laugh? Or not laugh. I'm not feeling laughed at, but I mean, what
No,
makes you?
I'm just enjoying the aliveness of our conversation.
Hmm. Oh, okay, yeah. And I went, oh my gosh, oh, I see, right, right. I have a relatively intact child in me, so I didn't have
Yeah,
that until I was 50, so that now I can, yeah,
yeah, that's a beautiful way of saying it. And I'm also seeing in you that you've got a really strong tapped in awareness to collective consciousness. Like you can just start channeling what many people are thinking and feeling.
yeah, it's true, yeah, it's true. Well, I'm working, yes, I do have that. I'm working with people for 35, 40 years is in many different cultures, and you start to get a
Yeah.
sense of what it's like,
Yeah.
what goes on inside people, and but yeah, I was always sensitive to the social world when I was a youngster. I grew up in New York City, and so the diversity of people was around me, and not everyone would be moved by that, but I was very moved by that, by the racial tensions in particular. So um, I didn't understand it, and I didn't like the way my parents thought about people of color and some reason. So anyway, so it made me think about what's those kind of issues, the different social experiences that people have.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've listened to any of the episodes from this podcast, but when Robert Jensen was on, are you familiar with who he is?
No, tell me
Okay,
who
so
he is.
he's a former professor and an author and an incredible human who put forward how radical feminism is in favor of men when he was teaching actively. So he made the correlation of racism and how at
Mm.
some point that was very unconscious in the culture. And there's been, it's not great where it is now necessarily, but it's progressed a lot with a lot more social awareness around, not to look at it that way, like to to see each other as people, as humans, right? And
Yeah,
he was saying that he's found it's far more difficult for people to comprehend patriarchy in the culture than it is for them to acknowledge racism, which is a really real and interesting point.
yeah, yeah. It's this for me, the analysis is the lack of witness. If no one sees it in its not sees it not only in the most overt violences, those are not seen either, but in the what people might call the microaggressions, their daily flow of air that we breathe. Um, People have to out those things and get to know them so that we notice. Um, yeah. And then people have to get to know it then internally. What
Yeah,
happens when you look in the mirror as a woman? What are the eyes that are looking at you and evaluating you and deciding whether you're beautiful, whether you're worthy, whether you should be loved? And so the internalization of that is this forces we're talking about that need to be deconstructed and resisted. Um,
yes,
Very difficult to look. In my um, my third book, it was called "You Can't Judge a Body by Its Cover," and I ended up interviewing and doing like a bunch of sessions and interviewing. It turned out to be women, but that why it was only women, there's a whole story in and of itself, which wasn't meant to be about body shame. And so I told 17 stories, told these women's stories. They were obviously okay with it. Yes, I want to be part of that. And those transcripts can be used that way. But
mm,
they were, it's not just their stories, it's the stories told through a therapeutic process. So the interaction with me, so you can see the insights flowing and what it had to do with how a person looked and a woman looked at her body and what she saw and how that unfolds. So the
yeah.
internalization of these things um, was enormous. The self-hatred, we could call it, but the internalized hatred would maybe be a better word. Um,
Mm.
yeah.
And that's a similar approach to the book that this project will become. And currently it's a podcast and there's a survey, and it's there to collect, the real words and the real experiences from both men and women. And, this whole thing is a invitation to a co-created um, definition. What is patriarchal sex? So rather than me telling everyone what it is, it's an invitation to say, hey, what is it to you? What is your experience? And
Oh,
be able to put all that forward and say, look at this for yourself. And then, here are some personal steps that you can take. So I love that you have an open inquiry like that running through your work as well. And I'd love
yeah.
to hear more about your work because I know we're coming towards the end of our
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
What would be useful? I don't, what would be,
What do you have going on at the moment that people can come and be part of with you if they want to check out what you offer?
well, there's a number of things. I have four books. My most recent book is called The Unshaming Way. So that would be available in many different places. I think it's been translated into seven languages, so it's available in many places. There's a lot more languages than seven, but um, um, following me on Instagram is a really good way because I put a lot of material out there. My next, well, I'm teaching in 2 days from now, I'm teaching a class on money trauma, the trauma that has to do with we're talking about sex, the money in the background, not in the, not being beaten up by by a dollar bill or something, but the way that system injures. And then I think at the end of September, I'm teaching a class, that'll be 7 weeks on trauma. That's for facilitators, meaning not you can come as an individual, but it's really meant to teach skills and methods and strategies to people who are therapists or coaches or healers of some kind. That's the next educational piece. Um,
Great, great. And you have a course on the unshaming way as well?
I do. It's a couple of years old, but people can get the recording of that. There's lots of, if people want that, they certainly can. What I would recommend is if people come to my website, they'll find lots of shorter courses that they can get. There'll be less money, and they can see whether my way or my style or my education is like resonates with their bodies, say that this is good food, or whether the body says this is not for me. Um, so I have lots of classes. I have 6 or 7 that are devoted only to facilitators. Only other people can come, but that'll be like, I want to work with people on addictions. I want to work with people on trauma. I want to work with people on eating disorders. I want to work with people on inner criticism. So there's methods to those. And then there's a lot of those short courses. They're usually like an hour and a half, 2 hours, and they're pretty low expenses. I try to make them under $50. So if somebody wanted to get a taste and do something and hopefully get something worthwhile. So there's a lot of courses for individuals also there on a whole range of topics. Because for me, shame is a master variable, meaning it's the way we look at things. So that when you unshame, you just look at it, you can take a topic like sexuality, like addictions, like depression. So I'm not a specialist in any one topic. I'm a specialist in the way shame operates. So if you are unshaming, as I define it, then you can go into a territory and
Yes.
learn. I was recently filmed in Slovakia. They're putting together a documentary on eating disorders, and I'm going to be a pretty central part of that documentary. And they asked me to work with people on film, so I work with 2 women one at a time that I never met before. That was also interesting because who the fuck is this dude? And I'm a man dude, and they don't know me, right? So it's like, so that was also interesting and took part of the process. And I'm mentioning that because the unshaming way says nothing's wrong with this person. They're suffering, but I begin by thinking I don't understand what's happening as opposed to a diagnosis. So then people say things to me. And then one woman said to me that she only eats, I can't remember, it was like 6 different foods. She'd been in and out of hospitals for 20 years because of what they did to her, but she wouldn't eat anything else. And so I think that's incredible. That's powerful, right? To not eat anything else. I'm not saying it's good for her. It'd be great if she could nourish her body in good ways. That's clear. But then I approach things with what kind of power and intelligence lives in her that leads her to take that course. That makes sense. So then I say to her, I say, what would happen? So then people have been trying to get her for 10, 20 years, different therapies in hospitals to eat more foods. It doesn't work. So I said to her, what would happen if, give me an example of a food that you wouldn't eat? I wouldn't eat meat, she says. Okay, let's imagine that I had meat in my hand. I don't. Just imagine it, right? What would happen? And she said, I would start to gag. I said, and if I brought it closer to you, there's no real meat in my hand, right? He said, I would choke. I wouldn't be able to breathe. So to me, this is pretty amazing because her body is saying, if you ask me to do something that I don't want to do, that's not right to me, that I haven't agreed to, I'd rather die. Can you follow
Mm,
that? I'm not adding that. Her body will die.
mm,
Isn't that incredible? That gives me a goosebump just to say. So she has this intelligence in her. She lives it out relative to food. She tells the story with food. I will not do, this is who I am. This is who I'm not. I have very strict limits to what I'm going to do and what I won't do, what I take in and what I won't take in. Of course, there's various violences that you could imagine in that. And I'm so powerful. I can say yes and no in a way that's more extreme than almost anybody you'll ever meet. I think that's a powerful creature right there.
Yes.
That makes sense. So I don't see a person who's weak and screwed up. I think of a person who's got a story who has powers that she doesn't know how to live yet. That's for sure. Anyway, so that's why I can apply unshaming to just about anything. I'm not an expert in eating disorders, although they asked me to come in and work with eating disorders because they know I was about to listen to somebody and think you're an amazing, powerful person, not just as an idea, but in how you're actually expressing yourself. I want like to find out what you're actually doing by getting to know you, not by telling you, yeah. And
How
then
to be. Yes.
she said to me afterwards, I got more out of that hour and a half than I have in 20 years of therapy.
I'll bet. Yeah.
Why?
No, no
Somebody
wonder
didn't
they,
treat me like a broken person.
yes. Yes. No
Hmm.
wonder they've sought you out to be part of that because your beautiful approach, I mean, especially around something as complex and dense as shame can be, you're just so approachable and you're so willing to be human and so willing to be real. And
Hmm.
so your inquiry into the intelligence of why shame is there in the first place,
Yeah.
and it reminds me of how I work with people and people's bodies, that there's a living intelligence inside of us. And instead of
Yeah.
telling it what it's doing wrong and what it should be doing instead, it's like, let me hear you. Let me really listen to you. Let me really hold
Yeah.
space for your process, you know.
So beautiful. It's so beautiful. What you're saying, it's so touching. Yeah. Like, that's what I call a witness, but the word doesn't matter. But that function, I want to know what is really inside of you, what your real experience is like.
Yes.
And and then that could be transformative in ways that my understanding about the issue and laying what I can lay on you and without your consent, et cetera, all that violence that happens in the therapeutic space. Amazing.
Yes. David,
Devash,
thank you
Devashi.
for being who you are. Thank you for
Mm,
doing the work that you're doing in the world. It's so needed. This approach itself is so
mm,
needed. And for what you've gone through and the man that you are to be
mm,
able to bring that approach, it is about you. It is about your relationship with yourself. So thank you for being someone who's
mm,
willing to dive into the darkness and bring that illumination.
mm, touched. I'm honored. Thank you. I'm taking in your kind words and they're very sweet in my body. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Whenever I'm out socially and a friend asks, Devashi, how can I get my partner into this exploration about living beyond patriarchal sex? My answer is exactly what I've put down in the show notes for you with this episode. And if you are willing to be the spell breaker of your bloodline and have the uninhibited pulse of Eros guiding you through life, beyond the matrix into the fullness of your divine sovereignty, then keep tuning in to these weekly episodes and share it with your friends. And may we all be free from suffering.